reconciliation with the Hamas. That was their call. They had to make the decision, and they paid the price. They paid the price, and they were the cause of the ultimate secession of Gaza and the new regime in Gaza of the Hamas. This is also something we have to take into account, and we have to be very careful about this. I'd like to say three more things. First of all, I'd like to say that it's always a question of choosing your options. And I believe a failed outcome, a no-solution situation, is the worst possible option we can think of. If at the end of this current round, the final line, the bottom line will be no solution, I believe we're going to enter a very, very difficult time. And I believe the first victim of this will be the Palestinian Authority. I cannot imagine the Palestinian Authority will be able to survive such a situation. Because once this happens, A, the Hamas will become stronger, B, Israel, because of the situation which will arise, will have to stand aside and no longer support the Palestinian Authority the way it is supporting it today, massively, by the way, massive support of Israel for the Palestinian Authority in every possible way. And we will stand aside, and that will be probably the worst situation we can imagine. It would be something comparable to what I would call a political Nakba. And I think this is something which nobody should entertain, and nobody should be happy that such a situation would come about. I believe, by the way, I'd say something in passing, that it's another sign, a tragic sign, that the time that we have engaged very extensively in easing the situation in the West Bank, in removing roadblocks, in all the situation which is described by General Spiegel. Is this the time now to launch a new campaign against Israel to boycott Israeli goods? After all, we want to negotiate. You want to negotiate. You didn't initiate this boycott a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago when the settlements were there, 10 years ago. Now you want to begin a new campaign against Israel? What message do you want to send to the Israelis? What is it you want to tell us by doing this? Or when you go around and you ask that the International Court of Justice should try Israeli generals because of what happened in Gaza, when those who were more vociferous than anybody else in egging on Israel to hit harder in Gaza during the cast-led operation and to do more and to bring about a collapse of the Hamas regime in Gaza. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right policy to take? I doubt it. I believe that ultimately, in the end, rather than have a no solution, we're going to have what we call a staged solution. We're going to go from stage to stage. At a very early stage, we'll have a Palestinian state with all the sovereignty, but also with all the responsibilities. And the Palestinian state will have to stand up to the scrutiny of the international community and prove that it can be a state. Is it possible? I hope so. I very much hope so. But 90% of the effort must be made by the Palestinians. They must set up their state, just as we set up our state in 1948. By the way, in 1948, the Jewish state of Israel received no support whatsoever from the international community, including the United States of America. It was only 20 years later that the United States began supporting Israel in one way or another. On the contrary, there was an arms boycott against Israel in 1948, and American Jews were arrested and sent to jail for trying to smuggle arms to Israel, who was then fighting its war of independence. So I think there is a merit in standing on your own feet, and I think we should applaud every effort in that direction, and we should think maybe that this would be the acid test for the Palestinians, for them and for us. I hope this would succeed. I'd like to make one last comment concerning personalities. A friend of mine here told you that he thought that there would be no outcome as long as Mr. Netanyahu is head of government. Well, I don't know if Mr. Netanyahu is going to make an agreement or not. He appointed me head of the Mossad, and I'm not speaking for him today, and I don't represent him, and on many issues we don't agree today. But I will tell you that at one time in 1997, when a crisis broke out between Israel and Jordan, when the Mossad, I was not there at the time, so this is a mishap for which I was not responsible, tried to eliminate a mid-level leader of the Hamas named Khaled Mashal, who has since obtained some prominence, as we all know. And the operation failed, and a crisis broke out between Jordan and Israel. And actually, the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan was then at stake. And the king of Jordan at the time, the late King Hussein, was certainly considering the possibility, seriously, of suspending the peace treaty with Israel, with horrendous consequences, both political and otherwise, and security, by the way, considerations on his part and our part, which could have had an untold effect on the history of the region. And I was then Israel ambassador to the European Union, and I was recalled by Mr. Netanyahu very hastily, and I came in several hours after the event, and I was asked to try and to start a dialogue with the king. And it was very difficult to start a dialogue with the king at the time because he didn't want to speak to any Israeli. He was extremely angry with Israel for what he considered to be actually an act of political treachery, if not more than that. And then I said, I was asked what I thought should be done in such a situation, and there were various ideas, and I said, you know, there's one thing I think we could do which could change the atmosphere, entirely change the atmosphere, from one side of the spectrum to the other. At that time, we had in jail the leader of the Hamas movement, Sheikh Yassin, and I said to the Prime Minister, I think we should release him, and we should release him to Jordan. And I thought that since Mr. Mashal was a member of the Hamas movement, this could create a chain reaction which would have all kinds of consequences in the region. Well, Mr. Netanyahu said no, under no circumstance. Come up with something else, he said to me. Think of something else. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, I can't think of anything else. He said, well, go back and think of something else. That was on a Friday evening. On Saturday morning, he called me and he said, go ahead. And we released Sheikh Yassin in 1997, not in order to save 6 Mossad operatives who were then in Jordan. We did it because strategically and politically it was essential to do something out of the box. And we did it. And there was one man in the region who burst out in fury at what we had done. And his name was Yasser Arafat. Thank you.
For incisive contributions, I'm sure there will be nothing like a consensus in the room, but I do detect a certain consensus on the panel, which I want to test a little bit. All the panelists seem to me to be suggesting unhappiness with the existing political and security status quo and a desire for some sort of settlement on along the lines of a two-state solution. So let me ask 2 questions, one political and the other technical and focused really on the future of security. The first political question is, given this unhappiness or problem with what's seen as perhaps a weak, if well-intentioned negotiating partner at this moment in time, is a national unity government which brings in Hamas, and Israel will have no control over that process at any sort of high level. Is a national unity government a good thing for Israel? And the second question is more specific, which I'd like you to answer in sequence, which is,